city in the American economy opens up the possibility now for a new orbiting, okay, not just orbiting around one center periphery relationship, but in fact a new orbit, a community, and a community that needs to sustain itself, its sense of community, orbits around the Mexico center point and the point, the satellite point as well of Redwood City. Now, Redwood City itself, for the Mexican communities, is also a satellite and a periphery now that extends beyond the limits of the national borders, but a periphery, but that has its own orbital thrust and orbital dimension. Okay, so that's when we say these ideas of orbit as well. Let's not limit ourselves to just these simple scientific ideas. Remember, again, these are kind of theoretical devices we are using to make sense of these things. Okay, so we're almost trying to fit this into a scientific framework where it, as we see, doesn't necessarily function in that manner. Okay, so we're just using these as tools to explain our ideas. So what we see now as well is that within Redwood City, the large group of migrants in Redwood City are as affected by the happenings in Mexico as they are by the happenings in Redwood City, and vice versa. There are people in Aguililla who are as affected by, if not more affected by, what happens in Redwood City than they would be the Mexican periphery, or even things that happen in their own community. And we could imagine, you know, the death of a loved one happening far away, or, you know, not even something this you know, extreme, but the idea of economic recession. A factory closing down in Redwood means unemployment and the possibility of certain members of the Aguililla community who are now living and residing and working in Redwood. Of course, we can see the knock-on effect and how this would go on to affect more people. Now, again, what's interesting is, though, before we are also going to get a bit more into these kind of satellite effects, this cause and effect, the causal relationships of these types of effects. But what we do see, actually, is an interesting kind of notion of kinship. Now, remember we talked about the idea of community, where did community come from? And we look at the extension of kinship relations. Okay, well, if it's the extension of kinship relations that determine community and the size of community, what happens when those that kinship relation divides or removes itself over a large spatial distance? Well, now in this postmodern era, in our era of globalization, we're able to sustain these kinship relations, these family relations, via telecommunication. So the developing points of community in terms of kinship relation and the demarcation and the limitation of kinship relations has a globalized dimension and a telecommunicative dimension, and is no longer necessarily restricted by space. Some people are as effective or as much a part of the family, as participant in the family, as they were if they were present in Aguililla. Now, the interesting thing as well is that for a lot of the people, the motivation to go to Redwood City is for sake of the family, that a lot of this money goes back to the family, gets sent back to the family to purchase land, or whatever. So it's even these family values that establish the kin and then the community that are themselves being projected and being removed from space. Family values of helping the family, where the help may have been staying on the farm and actually farming the land. Now the help can come from this this distance, okay, this removal of immediate spatial proximity. So again, we can see that how this is a viable now extended notion of community. Okay. Now, what's interesting though as well is that many of the people in the migrants in Redwood City are referred to or seen as proletarian servants in the paragon of post-industrial society. So it seems that at least the migrants in Redwood City are finding themselves at a lower social scale, that they are being allowed in to fill up gaps in the market. Now, just going back one split second, but before I forget, what we also see as well is that a lot of these people aren't necessarily looking for American citizenship, whereas permanent residency allows them now to jump back and forth between two communities. So allows them to sustain themselves within the spaceless distance of this community. Okay. So there's obviously, now we see the dimension of industrialization here. Okay, a lot of the motivation here is for this move towards industrialization. That this money can be collected, sent back to the house, to the home, and that the city itself, or the family and the community can modernize, can improve its own living standards. So there's a move towards this modernity, or this industrialization. So yes, and because of this now push for industrialization and these dreams of modernity, very few of them are able to be found within the local area. So again, while the community has been looking outside of its own national borders to find the possibility of sustaining itself and preserving its identity as a community, the individuals who try to realize their own goals and dreams have to leave that community, who try to realize their own goals and dreams within that community have to leave that community in order for that to now be possible. So it's this kind of extension of space, again, of how it is we can function and subsist in this spatio-geographic condition. Let me just turn the page now. Okay. So again, we see that while there is this attempt at modernizing, industrializing, and capturing the modernist or the modern or postmodern dream of success, realizes almost a compromise of this success. In fact, so in order for an individual to be successful and to be that wealthy individual in Aguililla, they have to leave the community and enter into a lower social class in Redwood City in order to preserve their dream of high class, upper class living. Okay, so we see ultimately this is a type of violence. Now I'm going to post another lecture on violence, Slavoj Žižek's violence. So if you want to refer to that a bit more, it might help flesh this point out. But what we can see is that within the apparent peaceful, civil American dream, or dream, modernist dream. That's not just limited to America, but within this modernist dream, we see the inherent violence that. Sorry, I'm getting my warning bell now. So we see within this this American dream, we see this inherent violence towards the class, that this violence allows people to exist as lower class in order to eventually, or to have to attempt to exist as lower class, or step down from their class that they are accustomed to, or their culture that they're accustomed to, in order to preserve that very culture. And this is where we see an underlying violence, that to preserve this very norm, we have to reject and lower ourselves to the standards of this norm. Okay.